The house learned to echo after the funeral. Plates made a bigger sound. The hallway carried footsteps like it had an opinion. On the dining table, a slice of pie sat half-eaten beside a glass of water that had stopped sweating hours ago. I stood there with my hands on the chair backs the way a man steadies a ladder he hasn't climbed yet. Mark cleared his throat first. My son has two go-to openings: a sigh when he wants sympathy and a throat clear when he wants compliance. "Dad," he began, and Laura finished the sentence for him. "We should talk about being practical." Practical means sell the house when the person saying it doesn't love the house. It means convert memories to liquidity. It means, in their math, save me from the future by erasing my past. They were kind about it in the way people are kind when they've already decided what your answer should be. Taxes, maintenance, fall risks, outdated wiring. Laura had the bullet points lined up like chairs for a recital. Mark nodded along, jaw set in the way his mother used to call his "I'm right" face. I poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the string go white where the water touched it. "We won't be selling," I said, and let the words find their chair at the table. "We can talk about repairs, about help with the gutters or the hedges, but we won't be selling." The room tested the sentence and found it steady. You don't argue much the week you bury a wife. You breathe and you keep your tongue, mostly because both are harder than they look. After they left with a promise to revisit this soon, I walked out to the back garden, where rosemary grows thick along the fence and lemons hang too bright for ordinary days. Helen planted both. She said rosemary remembers for you and lemon insists you show up. I pressed a sprig between my fingers until the oil woke up. Inside, I made myself open the tall cabinet where Helen kept the papers that are boring when you don't need them and holy when you do. Wills, titles, maps, warranties. Behind a blue binder of tax returns sat a flat green folder I didn't remember, a color she liked for things that needed noticing. On the tab she'd written, in the same hand that used to write grocery lists with small extravagances in the margin, "Read when the house gets called practical." I carried it to the kitchen table, set it down, and sat before opening it. Inside, a summary page in Helen's precise pen, then tabs. Accounts, separate. Insurance, Emily, Portugal. A small manila envelope taped to the inside cover. On the summary, she had written a sentence at the top. "If they turn the home into a burden, we will turn it back into a legacy." Under that, bullet points. Tidy, loving, ruthless, the way care sometimes is. A list of accounts in her name I didn't know about. Modest balances, earmarked for maintenance and taxes with my name already added as survivor. A policy naming Emily, our granddaughter, beneficiary for an education set aside with conditions that sounded like Helen. Graduate something that teaches you to make. Volunteer somewhere that reminds you you're not the center. Spend one term away from your language. The Portugal tab held a printout of a deed I hadn't seen, a property tax stub in Portuguese, and a photocopy of a key on a white background with the words "Trust Anna" underlined twice. The address was in the Algarve, a white town with red roofs, the kind travel magazines talk about like a dream. There was a note in the margin. "When you go, you'll know why I didn't make a fuss. The sky will explain itself." In the taped envelope, an actual key, brass worn to the touch, and a card with a phone number beginning +351 and a name, Anna. I rubbed my thumb along the key's teeth and felt the old sensation of a plan that didn't need to announce itself. Helen was not dramatic. She was architectural. She built outcomes the way she built shelves. Level, strong, politely invisible until you leaned on them. I called Peter, our lawyer, a man with a desk that looked like a ship you could sail across an ocean of bureaucracy. I need to formalize some boundaries, I said. He answered the way good counsel does. Bring what you have. We'll give your boundaries paperwork. At his office the next morning, we made a list on yellow paper. 1. A letter to Mark and Laura stating that I am competent, that I will not be selling, and that any discussion about assets must go through the council. 2. A change of locks, because love has keys it shouldn't. 3. A post office box, because mail is the quietest kind of surveillance. 4. A complete photo and video inventory of the house and garden, date stamped, printed, and duplicated. 5. A draft of a simple living trust for the property that lays out who decides what and when, in case grief makes amnesia fashionable. 6. A medical note, if my doctor was willing, confirming what my mind has been proving, that I know the day of the week, the month we're in, the name of the man asking me to give him my house for his convenience. You don't have to fight, Richard, Peter said, sliding the list back to me. You can document. The paper will do the fighting. I left with stamped envelopes and a calm I recognize. It's the calm you get when the tools are on the bench in the right order and you know which one your hand needs next. The next thing I did was soft on its face and harder underneath. I pulled down all the boxes in the attic labeled Mark and Laura, matchbox cars, a Letterman jacket that still smelled like winter, cartons of photos, a shoebox full of ribbons from a time when a ribbon was enough. I added the things that end up squatting in a parent's house because no one wants to end a debate about where they belong. Then I packed them neatly, labeled them clearly, and shipped them certified to their address with a note inside the first box. Keep what's yours. Decide where it lives. Visit what's mine. Don't try to move it with your mouth. I don't know if they read the last line out loud. I do know they signed for the boxes. We met for dinner 2 nights later because families keep trying even when they don't agree on how to. I made roast chicken, the way Helen did, lemon under the skin, rosemary on top. When dessert came, I set a pie on the table and cut 4 slices. Mark reached for his phone. Laura began with the tone a person uses when they want to sound gentle and land firm. Dad, we found a realtor we trust. He says the market. I put the pie knife down and folded my hands. We're not discussing square footage at my table, I said. We will not be selling. If you have proposals, you can send them to Peter. But this room is for food and for news that doesn't try to move walls. I tapped the edge of my plate, a small sound, metal on porcelain. There will be pie on Sundays. You're welcome. The house stays. Laura's eyes flashed. Mark's jaw did the old set. We ate in the kind of silence that has furniture, chairs, a rug, the knowledge that love can be present in the room and not permitted to take your keys. That night I ordered 2 new deadbolts and made an appointment with a locksmith who doesn't ask questions he doesn't need the answers to. I drove to the post office and rented a P.O. box with a number that doesn't mean anything to anyone. I printed photographs of every room in the garden, laid them out on the dining table, and wrote dates and times in a neat hand at the bottom edge of each one, ink that would still be ink when tempers had finished being tempers. The phone number for Portugal sat on my counter under the weight of the key. I dialed it at noon our time because I figured noon here is late dinner there, and late dinner is when kindness picks up. A woman answered on the second ring. "Yes," she said, the S shaped like a ribbon. "Anna?" "Yes," she said again, and then said my name before I offered it. "Richard. She told me one day you would call when the house was called practical." She laughed softly. I never liked that word. "How?" I caught myself. "Helen." Of course Helen had called before the end. Of course she had arranged for a stranger to know my name so it wouldn't feel like a stranger. "There is a key for you here," Anna said, "but you have the better one. When you come, I will show you how the shutters stick in the afternoon, and which lemon tree forgives the sun. Do not worry about the rest. I have been guarding, not working. Guarding, not working. Some people don't understand the difference. Helen did. Anna did. I was going to. 2 weeks later, after Peter filed what needed filing and my doctor signed a simple letter with a clear sentence, I packed a small bag and bought a plane ticket with aisle seats because pride doesn't help with knees. I left a schedule on the kitchen table for Mark and Laura. Pie. Sunday. 4 p.m. and nothing else. The garden took a long breath. I locked the new deadbolt and listened to the sound a door makes when it meets its frame exactly. Firm, clean, not a debate. At the airport, the sky wore its business face. On the plane, a baby cried and was comforted. Over the ocean, the clouds laid their backs under us and let us pass. In Lisbon, tiles told their own quiet stories on the walls of the station, where I changed to a smaller train. When I stepped off in the Algarve, the light behaved like it was glad to do its job. Anna was waiting in a linen jacket and a smile that didn't apologize for surviving. "Come," she said. "We will let the house say what it needs to." We drove past white walls and bougainvillea that refused to be modest. The villa was a simple thing. 2 stories, red tile roof, a gate that squeaked like it had made up its mind to squeak forever. Lemon trees banked one side, rosemary the other, as if Helen had mailed her preferences to this latitude in a brown paper parcel and the place had signed for it. Anna handed me a ring of keys and pointed to the oldest brass. "This is the front door," she said, "but the kitchen door is the one you will use, because that is the one that makes sense." She turned a different key herself. The door opened into a room that smelled like tile in summer and wood that's been polite to strangers. On the table, under a small vase of olives and 2 sprigs of something green, lay a note in Helen's hand. Only 3 words, as if she'd been practicing for brevity. Breathe, then decide. I stood with my palm on the cool wood and did the first thing. Breathing is free and expensive at the same time. The second would take me a day. I slept hard the first night in the Algarve and woke to shutters cutting the light into obedient stripes. The kitchen faucet hiccuped once and then remembered how to be a faucet. On the table, Helen's 3 words had done their job. Breathe. Then decide. I boiled water in a dented kettle and set a lemon on the counter to roll under my palm, the way she taught me. Loosen the fibers before you ask for the juice. Anna arrived with a folder, a ring of smaller keys, and the kind of breakfast that doesn't pretend. Bread, a dish of butter, a plate of tomatoes that still smelled like the plant. We will do the sensible things, she said, opening the folder. Not all today, but enough so your breath can stay slow. Sensible things. I learned to love that phrase as much as I used to hate practical. We walked the perimeter. She showed me the tile that stays cooler, the window that sticks when the afternoon decides to be heavy, the fuse that needs persuasion. Under a cypress, she dug with her fingers and pulled up a minute cable box, weatherproofed. Camera, she said. Pointed only to the gate. I am not a spy. She smiled. I am a guard. At the small town hall, we did papers with a clerk who wore his stamp like a baton. I gave Anna a limited power of attorney. No banking, no selling, only care. Pay utilities, accept deliveries, schedule repairs, sign for nothing more than maintenance. In the bank, a woman wrote my name with an accent that made it look better on the page. We opened a local account with a modest balance that could breathe without being tempting. If anyone asks me for more than the garden needs, Anna said, I will tell them the lemon said no. The afternoons there have a way of telling a man he is not required to argue with the time. I sat on the back steps and let the sun explain itself across white walls. In the distance, the water said the same sentence over and over and never got tired of it. At dusk, I walked the rooms and pictured Helen walking them before me. She didn't need to own a place loudly. She needed a place to keep another version of our life ready in case the one with a roof of shingles asked us to compromise too much. On the third day, I called home. A Sunday. Pie, I told Mark when he answered. 4 o'clock. Be there if you want to be there. If not, there will be pie anyway. He said he'd see what worked. Laura texted an hour later. We're looking at numbers. Realtor says the market window is narrow. I sent Peter's address. She replied with nothing, which is a kind of reply. The next voice I called belonged to Emily. She picked up on the first ring and filled my ear with the optimism of someone whose bones haven't yet learned to forecast rain. Granddad, Mom says you're on a postcard. More grout than glamour, I said. I have an envelope for you. Your grandmother's handwriting. She went quiet in the way young people do when they realize the dead kept paying attention right up to the end. When can I see you? She asked. When you can come without refereeing, I said. Soon, she said. I can come soon. She arrived with a backpack that sounded like pencils and a curiosity that sounded like her grandmother. We sat at the kitchen table and I put the envelope in her hands. Her name was on it in Helen's tidy script, the E looped like a ribbon. Inside, a small letter, a modest bond certificate, and a card with 3 lines. For studies or work that make something real. For time spent somewhere that isn't home. For a project that helps someone you can name. Emily read them like vows. She always made rules that didn't feel like rules, she said. They're conditions, I said, which is another word for invitations you have to earn. She folded the bond back into the envelope the way people fold flags. I want to spend a term here, she said, eyes gone to the window. Learn why lemon trees forgive the sun. I taught her the lemon trick, rolling until the rind went soft under our palms. You do this to people too, I told her. Roll them a little inside your mind before you cut. You'll get more kindness from them, and less acid. When she left a note on the counter. Young handwriting, trying to be disciplined. I'll be back. Keep a corner of the sky for me. I stood in the doorway longer than necessary after her taxi pulled away, because some departures deserve witnesses. The week ended with a rhythm. Sign, tuck, water the rosemary, measure the shade. The work here wasn't running away. It was making later possible without asking permission from people who had confused care with control. Back home, later came quick. Peter forwarded a notice. Mark and Laura had filed a petition in probate court styled as concern, requesting limited conservatorship to assist with decisions in the best interest of the ward, a phrase that put my teeth on edge. They attached a declaration about stairs and slippery tubs, about missed appointments I hadn't missed, about finances they didn't understand but were comfortable describing. People can do a lot with the words for your own good. Peter had already filed our response: medical letter from my doctor, dates of my travel, copies of the letters we'd sent, the inventory photos, the proof of the P.O. box, the trust draft with my signature, and the witness signatures dried true. "We will be measured," Peter said, not angry. I said yes because measured is a cousin of mercy. The hearing room was the color all hearing rooms are, the color of compromise painted too long ago. The judge looked like a carpenter who knew where a square lived and wasn't afraid to find it. Mark and Laura sat at one table in clothes that said maturity louder than their mouths ever had. Peter sat beside me with a folder arranged like a timeline you could hold. Mark's lawyer spoke first. Concern, risk, care, sell the house before the market does what markets do. "He is grieving, Your Honor," the lawyer said, as if grief cancels competence. The judge nodded and wrote something. Peter stood and declined to perform. He put into the record the things paper loves: dates, signatures, photographs, invoices paid, letters mailed, receipts folded. He handed up my doctor's letter with the single sentence that matters: "Mr. is fully oriented and capable of managing his affairs." He handed up the trust. He handed up the letter I sent Mark and Laura that began, "We won't be selling." He didn't make speeches because speeches bruise easily. The judge asked me 2 questions. "Who is your counsel?" I said Peter's name. "What day is it?" I said the day. He asked one more without asking. He looked at my hands, and I made sure they were steady. He ruled in the tone of a man measuring lumber. Petition denied. No sale ordered. No conservatorship. He spoke to Mark and Laura the way decent people do when they give you back the line you stepped over. "You may love your father," he said, "but you may not use that love as a lever." Then to me, "Mr. Grief is not incompetence. If at any point you want to delegate, do it in writing to someone who respects ink." On the way out, Mark caught my eye for a second because eyes don't always ask permission to tell the truth. He looked like the boy who wanted me to fix his bicycle and resented the part where he had to watch how. Laura's mouth was a straight line she couldn't unclench. We rode the elevator together and pretended there were more floors than there were. That Sunday, there was pie. I wrote pie. No square footage. On a card and taped it inside the front door, where a family hangs a calendar. I put 2 plates on the table, then 4, then 2 again, because I didn't know how many people love decides to be when it comes to dinner. Mark and Laura came late, Emily on time. We ate, which is a peace treaty food knows how to enforce when people let it. Talk slid where it should. Weather, the neighbor's new dog, Emily's idea about a term abroad. When the conversation drifted toward money like a boat that thinks the shoreline is a magnet, I said the sentence I had been practicing. This is a house, not a portfolio. We cut another slice. After dishes, I walked the garden with Emily. She put a palm on Helen's rosemary and closed her eyes. "She's here," she said. "She is," I told her, "when we behave the way she asked us to." In the week that followed, I hung a small wooden sign on the back gate. Nothing fancy, just letters burned in with a steady hand. Helen's Garden. Under it, smaller. No sales talk past this point. Visitors laughed and then obeyed. The light in the kitchen learned our rhythm again. The house unlearned its echo. One afternoon, the mail brought a thin letter with Portuguese stamps and handwriting that climbed the page like ivy. Anna wrote to say the lemon trees were scandalous this year, and the shutters had decided to behave. "You will come back," she said. I left a bowl under the tap, because sometimes a house needs something to aim at. I wrote back and told her about the hearing. "Paper can be a wall," I said. We did not shout. We signed. At night I sat at the dining table, my desk between 8 and 10, and made a list called Keep, Share, Hold Back. Keep, the trust, the keys, the plan. Share, the Sunday pie, the garden sign, the conditions on Emily's bond. Hold back, the limits of my patience, the exact sizes of the accounts, because transparency is not a suicide note. Measured, not angry. That was a note I wanted the house to hold in its wood. A week later, I booked another flight to the Algarve, this time with a return date that felt like a promise instead of an escape. On the kitchen counter, I left a card under a lemon. Pie. Sunday. 4 p.m. Bring news, not leverage. I turned the deadbolt, new, oiled, honest, and listened for the sound that meant it was doing its job. The second trip back to the Algarve felt different, because I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward an arrangement. The plane banked over a line of roofs that looked like terracotta buttons sewn to the earth. At the villa, the gate squeaked its familiar opinion, and the kitchen remembered me by how the door gave on the third push. Anna had left the same small vase on the table, olive twigs and 2 stubborn sprigs of green. Under it, a folded sheet of paper with yesterday's date. Shutters oiled, lemon trees dramatic. No one has tried to be clever. In the corner, she'd drawn a little gate and shaded the hinges. People who guard things learn to talk in sketches. We set about finishing the sensible work we'd started. A service contract with the electrician who refuses to upcharge widowers. A written schedule for the well pump. Clear labels for the lockbox and its codes. And a printed page above it that said what the lockbox is for and what it will never be for. I signed a simple letter authorizing Anna to receive deliveries, not questions. We attached it to the folder the town hall likes and slid copies where copies sleep. At noon, we stood in the garden and watched a thin breeze bend a lemon branch. "Your wife asked me to keep the place ready for you," Anna said. "Not perfect." "Ready." She ran a hand across the rosemary and smelled her palm. "This is the kind of work I like." It was the kind that believed in a future without demanding a shape from it. I called Emily from the back steps. She answered from our kitchen at home, her voice busy with a clatter of dishes. "I fed your neighbor's cat," she said. "He pretends to prefer brand names." Then eagerness gathering air under it. Can I apply for a term abroad? Lisbon, if they'll have me. Grandma's rules. Make something. Go somewhere not home. Help someone I can name. She paused. I want to help Anna inventory the shutters, she added, half joking, half serious. We'll call it field work. Send me the paperwork, I said. We'll have the same conversation with your mother we had with a judge. Measured, not angry. In the evenings, I started drafting something Helen would have written if she'd had the time. A covenant for Helen's garden. It wasn't a contract. It was a promise pinned to wood. I listed the things the garden was for. Rosemary, lemon, pie after 4, talk that doesn't use money as a weapon, and the things it wasn't for. Sales pitches, pressure, or the kind of advice that pretends to be love while pushing. I included a line I stole from the judge. You may love me. You may not use that love as a lever. At the bottom, I left 3 lines for signatures. Not legal signatures. Human ones. On the last morning in Portugal, Anna handed me a brown paper parcel tied with string. Inside, a small wooden board, with the covenant burned in a steady hand. I took the liberty, she said. It looks better in wood. It did. Words like that are meant to live outdoors. Back home, the house met me like a house should. Lights easy, lock sure, quiet that wants company but doesn't pout when it doesn't get it. On the first Sunday, I screwed the covenant to the inside of the garden gate, across from the little Helen's Garden sign. The board sat there like it had always been meant to, grain catching the afternoon. Mark read it that same afternoon. He came alone, which was a kind of thoughtfulness. He stood by the gate with his hands in his pockets and worked his mouth like he was choosing between 3 versions of a sentence. This is a lot, he said finally. It's exactly enough, I answered. He nodded once. A muscle in his jaw loosened, then tightened, then remembered it didn't have to prove anything. We ate pie at 4. He told a story I'd heard before about a coach who taught him how to run a bin. I laughed in the same place I always laugh. When the talk nosed toward plans and prices, I tapped the covenant with my knuckle like a man pointing at a speed limit sign. He smiled a little at that and changed the subject to Emily, which is what decent people do when they remember the living are watching us. Laura came the next week. She paused at the sign longer than Mark had. Is this legal? She asked. It's polite, I said. That outranks legal in this garden. She gave a small, reluctant smile. Human is our best version of ourselves when we let it be, and told me her mother's roses had finally learned to behave. The letter from the university arrived on a Wednesday. Emily read it at my table with the ceremony acceptance letters deserve and the urgency young hearts prefer. Conditional approval, she said. Lisbon term, credits to transfer back. A supervisor with a name I can't pronounce yet. She exhaled a grin. I'll learn. We spread forms out between plates. Her mother came by. We kept the pen moving and the voices calm. We did our work the way bread is made. Steps, no rush, a little resting. At the end, we had a stack of copies and a plan that didn't trip over itself. Grandma would have liked this part, Emily said, tapping the page that listed her volunteer hours. She liked when help had receipts. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the quiet and made one more small list, the kind that can live on the inside of a cupboard door and change how a week feels. 3 long rules They looked like housekeeping, but they were architecture. Decide in daylight. No big talk after 8. No money talk after pie. No letters sent hot. Sunlight makes better sentences. Name the room. Kitchen, food and news. Garden. Memory and rest. Office. Paper and signatures. Don't swap their jobs. Respect the gate. If the covenant is hanging where you can see it, you don't test it. You obey it, the way you obey a step that knows how tall it is. I taped the list inside the cabinet with the light bulbs and batteries. Paper has always been my truest furniture. There are still days that want more from me than I want to give them. Grief tests fences even after you've set the post in concrete. On those days, I drive 2 neighborhoods over to a hardware store where the clerk knows the difference between a question and a complaint. I buy a small thing, sandpaper, a box of screws, a bracket I might use twice. I bring it home and fix something that isn't broken. It spares me from trying to fix people. The call from Anna came on a Monday. "We have a small problem," she said, cheerful in the way of people who know a problem's size because they measured it. A shutter fell out of love with its hinge. She laughed. The lemons applauded. I gave her permission to hire the same old carpenter with the stubborn cheeks. Then we talked about Emily and her plans, and Anna used the word proud, like she had bought shares in it. The morning the Lisbon term became real, Emily stood in my doorway, in a jacket that wanted to be practical and a smile that refused to be. She hugged with both arms. "I'll send pictures of doors," she said. "Pictures of anything that swings open and closes right. Elsus?" She picked up her bag and then put it down and then picked it up again, which is the choreography of leaving when you're ready and not ready at the same time. I walked her to the gate. She signed the covenant under her name. "I like rules when they're kind," she said. "Most good ones are," I said. After she left, the house settled into the small music of a place that likes its work. The clock made an honest sound. The sink cleared its throat and then behaved. In the garden, a bee figured out a lemon blossom without asking for directions. In the months that followed, nothing dramatic happened, and that was the point. Mark learned to bring news instead of leverage. Laura learned to bring her mother's rose cuttings instead of a market report. I learned to listen for the difference between help and pressure and to name it aloud when the line got fuzzy. We all learned to cut pie the way Helen did, with the knife warmed under hot water. The slices hold their shape better that way. The lesson is portable. Every few weeks, a letter from Portugal arrived with handwriting that made the stamps feel proud of themselves. Sometimes a photo fell out. Shutters permitted to be handsome, lemons showing off, a new clay pot near the steps. In return, I mailed back a snapshot of the covenant board under the morning light, or a picture of Emily on a cobbled street where the buildings pretend they don't know how to be square. One evening, I sat at the dining table, the place where our family tries to be who we say we are, and spread out a few pages for no other reason than to touch them. The trust, the covenant, the 3 long rules. A copy of the judge's order with its quiet refusal to be emotional. I stacked them, squared the corners with my palm, slid them into the fireproof envelope, and wrote on the front in my neatest, "Paper, that kept the peace. Then I went outside and watered Helen's rosemary, like a man thanking a plant for teaching him an ethic. The gate clicked in the light wind. The covenant didn't need me to read it again, but I did anyway. You may love me. You may not use that love as a lever. No sales talk past this point. Pie. Sunday. 4 o'clock. People imagine victories arrive with trumpets. Most of mine don't. They arrive as water coming to a boil exactly when you need tea. As a lemon giving up its juice because you rolled it first. As a door that meets its frame without argument. As a family that learned to pause at a sign, read, and obey. When I finally put out the kitchen light, I left the porch light on, the way Helen taught me. A home should not greet you in darkness. Paper helped with safety. We built the peace by hand.